have those dogs, right?
Shall we stand for the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's a couple more empty chairs here in the front, and I think there's some more in the hallway. People want to sit down. Okay. Let the record show that we are all here with the exception of Mr. Churchill and Mrs. Lyons. Do we have any additions or deletions on the agenda?
The agenda be approved as submitted.
Support.
Motion and support to approve the agenda as submitted. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The minutes from our January 18th meeting.
Fine. I'll make a motion those be approved as submitted.
Motion and support to approve the January 18th minutes as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, the first item on our agenda tonight is review of the sign ordinance relative to content-based regulation.
Okay, the draft you have in front of you is the result of review by legal counsel. There've been a few grammatical changes, areas where we wanted to make sure that if signs are placed in the right-of-way, that the entity with jurisdiction over the right-of-way has approval of replacement of the sign, as approved to general approval, as approval of replacement of the sign. Other approval, of course, comes by virtue of the sign ordinance. So, for those of you not familiar with what we're doing here, there had been a recent Supreme Court decision that signage could not be judged or regulated based on its content or based on what the sign says. So what the Planning Commission has been doing is now changing our sign ordinance based on that ruling and otherwise regulating sign based on placement, size, height, type of construction of the sign, or sometimes the condition under which the sign might be erected, such as instead of saying in an ordinance, real estate signs can be allowed with this size, we can't say that anymore because you have to read the sign in order to know that it's a real estate sales sign. So now we talk about signs that are subject to a contract that can be put up. Those are the type of things that the Planning Commission's been working on and changing in this ordinance. And we're now at the final point to where I'm recommending the Planning Commission that this can go to public hearing. Earliest date would be March 1.
Don't we have to do 30? Don't we have to do?
We only need the 15 days.
Okay. Okay, motion and support to schedule a public hearing on the proposed sign ordinance amendment for March 1st. Here it's 7 o'clock. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next item is use terminology review for convalescent homes.
One of the things the Planning Commission has undertaken as a priority to review all the different uses in the ordinance, and those uses which have common meanings or might be able to be lumped together under a single common definition are now under review. So at this particular point, the Planning Commission is looking at uses where we currently have listed, such as assisted living facility, convalescent home, elderly housing, nursing home. We have all those terms in the ordinance, and we want to consolidate them into a fewer different definitions that can cover all of those. So I have for the Planning Commission the current use listings, such as I just mentioned, that appear in the ordinance, some proposed definitions for assisted living center. This would basically be the home such as the Brook, where people can come in, go in, basically get living assistance with only very limited health care. And then the health living center, which would be more like your nursing home, where you would get the professional medical care along with your assisted living. So those are the two main definitions that I'm offering you relative to those that I believe can replace all these other terms that we have in the ordinance, as well as the addition of adult daycare center. These are getting more popular, and offering you a definition for that use as well.
John?
The only thing I had on these was the caveat in both of those, the assisted living center and the healthcare living center. The end caveat there that except a state licensed residential facility is defined under Public Act 110 of 2006. Those definitions include the state licensed facility. But the state licensed facility cannot be governed by our regulations. But I think the definition still does include it, so I would say instead of except, say however, state licensed facilities under this are not subject to this regulation. Because the definition covers them regardless.
Yeah, that's fine. Accomplishes the same thing.
My concern was that we had mental and physical in there, and it looks like you did some research, and that is acceptable.
Sure.
I think that's really important.
And we have to send it by legal counsel as well. So.
We had a big headache with that last time. This will eliminate all that extra discussion.
But that's included in the healthcare living center definition.
Anybody else?
Well, I'll put it in the form of an ordinance amendment. I'll bring it back to you guys, and then very likely.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, now that we know what the definition might be, now we can figure out where they should go, right? That's the next step.
That would be the next step. I'll offer
I think
those
that's an
recommendations
important
with
step.
that, right?
Right. Okay, do we have any other unfinished business? Okay, under new business, 2018 capital improvement program timeline.
Okay, it's time again to start compiling the capital improvement plan as is required by the Planning Act. I've sent notice for projects to be sent to me by the different agencies and departments of the county. Also sent a letter out to townships who we have that have a recreation plan on record or as part of the county recreation plan, inviting them to submit projects as well. The timeline that I have before you that I would like you to approve is basically the same timeline as we had last year, with the dates changed, of course. So this represents basically the same time frame for the same procedure.
I don't have a problem with that. It's fine. Carry on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and the next item under new business is discussion of vacation rental. Steve?
I apologize, your meeting would have been 10 minutes if this one was happening. That would have been a wreck.
No, I'm sure Scott would have found something
We
else.
left room for you. so.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. It was a couple of months ago that I brought this to the Planning Commission's attention. I was mentioning that we, in the last couple of years, 2-3 years, we had been receiving additional complaints about transient rentals, or what a more common term is short-term rentals, STRs. That's an acronym that people are using in various fields. And these are basically single-family homes that are being turned into a commercial rental, either by the day or by the week. Typically less than 30 days. With the advent of VRBO.com, which is Vacation Rental by Owner website that handles, that's just one of a number, it's probably the most popular. There's another one similar to that called Airbnb.com. Those are often websites that do, that assist. It's part of what's called the sharing economy. It's like Uber. You have a car, you're driving, you go online and you offer up a ride in your car for a certain amount of money. It's a way. The sharing economy happens typically outside of what we consider the traditional economy, where you have taxis and that type of thing. That's a similar example to VRBO.
Yeah.
VRBO.com has allowed a lot of people with homes wherever they live to go online and offer up their home for a significant amount of money in many cases, especially if you have a waterfront parcel, to gather some significant income by renting it by the day or by the week. You handle it yourself. People are allowed to go online and judge and rate your location. Obviously, the higher the rating, the more you can charge, the more reliable it is, just like any business. And in fact, when I first moved here, I sort of assumed that it was happening in a number of places, but we didn't have the online system at that time. I don't know when it exactly came in, but it seems like not just in Cheboygan County, but in everywhere around the United States. It happened about 2 or 3 years ago. All of a sudden, it sort of got to a head and became this economy of scale where enough was happening where local municipalities were starting to hear about them, both in the positive and in the negative. A lot of people were starting to complain. All of a sudden, the neighbor's home where so-and-so lived for a number of years was purchased by somebody else, and different people are showing up every weekend and every night. And oftentimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's when the complaints start to come. Typically, they have to do with parking of vehicles, because the home, you pay a price for the home, and then to get your best value, you bring people along. And I know personally, when I almost arranged a VRBO, I was going to cram about my wife and I, and about 8 of our other friends in a 4-bedroom home, which probably, typically you don't have 8 people every day, every week in a vacation home, but maybe some people do. But so those were typically where the complaints were coming from, but also a lot of communities were finding that it was boosting property values, it was boosting local income. I think a lot of people were finding that, and in a particular incident, and one of the people that we've had to take enforcement action on, they had purchased the home as an early retirement investment, and because of VRBO, they were able to afford to make the payments, and it was then going into the purchase of the home and paying it off, and then eventually when they retire, they could move into it, and they were able to purchase that retirement home a lot earlier than they had originally expected. So for them and for a lot of people, it's a huge financial benefit. That's sort of the bigger picture of what I know of VRBOs and Airbnbs. Where it comes to Cheboygan County is that when this originally came about, and I realized we were having a certain number of complaints we were going to have to address. Some of them we didn't have to address. They weren't illegal because they were grandfathered in. They were rentals that had been happening for a number of years. The ones where we had to start pursuing them, I believe it was just within the last couple of years where we had some that had to be pursued. I did talk to legal counsel to make sure, and we confirmed that in the Lake and Stream zoning district at least, which is where a lot of these were happening because it's on the waterfront, we don't have, in the list of permitted uses, we don't have a permitted use that allows for them. And I double checked with the definition of single family dwelling. The way that we have our zoning ordinance set up, it isn't currently permitted. It is allowed by special use permit in ag forest zoning district, which is a huge portion of the county, but not the waterfront. It's allowed, it could be allowed, it depends on what you determine to be boarding and lodging houses. Typically, the traditional definition of boarding and lodging house might be you rent a room for somebody, maybe they're a single worker working in the area for the summer, say a construction worker or agricultural worker, staying in the area for a while. All they need is a room and a house. I think boarding and lodging houses is typically defined that way, but we don't have it defined in the zoning ordinance, so it could be determined to be similar to this type of VRBO. That decision hasn't been made by the Planning Commission or the ZBA at this point. Although there is a use variance in front of the ZBA right now that was tabled at the last meeting until the next meeting in order for some more discussion to occur. The applicant had been informed that this was going to be on the agenda, and he asked that it be tabled. So with it being illegal, and with us, with me realizing as I try to assign various staff to do enforcement, I realize this is what we've done so far is just the tip of the iceberg. And to have this conversation is really important because, as I mentioned it briefly at the last meeting, we just looked for brief I wasn't looking for a decision by the Planning Commission, and for the public, there hasn't been a vote of the Planning Commission, yea or nay, as to what to do next with this. So right now, it's illegal. We've confirmed that with legal counsel.
Sure.
But we have heard from a number of people, both in the positive and in the negative, that there's concern about this.
Yeah.
Either we should allow everybody to do this and more people to do it because of the economics, and we should restrict it because it's really impacting negatively the neighborhoods along the waterfront. So those needs have to be balanced, and this discussion has to happen. I don't expect this to be a quick conversation. I don't expect, obviously it's not here for a decision for you tonight. Just as an example, just last week, end of last week, I read an article in the Mining Journal. It was a listserv of planning news articles that I was reading, and they had a community forum, and it was a joint meeting between the City of Marquette's Planning Commission and the City of Marquette City Council. And they were getting together because over 2 years, they had 20 public forums to discuss the topic, and they were realizing that the Planning Commission was going down one path and the City Council was going down another path, and they each had slightly different ideas as to where this should go, and so they needed to have this joint meeting. After tonight's meeting, I intend to provide a summary memo to the Board of Commissioners right away, and to keep that entity involved also, and on top of what conversation is going on here, because obviously there's going to be people that feel very passionate both ways on both sides of this issue. So a couple of other things I just want to point out. So how are people handling it differently? As you know, cities, villages, and townships have different regulations that they're allowed to have versus what counties can have. Counties can't have blight ordinances, and we can't have noise ordinances. And I say that because a lot of what I've been reading online, where people in cities and villages where they're allowing this type of thing, they also have licensing control over these types of things, where, for instance, if you have 2 or 3 noise violations of the local city noise ordinance, you can have your license revoked. So they have a lot of control at the city and village level in Michigan as to the potential negative impacts of this type of use. At the county level, we don't necessarily have that. We can put some noise requirements in the zoning ordinance. We don't have them in there right now related to this, but we can put them in. We can't do licensing, so we can't have a rental licensing process for vacation rentals. That's not available to counties. In addition to whatever we do at the county level, local townships may be able to do that. You have to talk to your local township attorney. That's up to them. Cities and villages do for sure. City of Frankfort is at one end of the scale, where they're not just allowing it in every single family home, they're encouraging it, and the city is assisting them in marketing their rental homes. However, they did say once we get saturated, we're going to start putting in a whole lot of ordinances and other requirements in there. They're going to have a licensing process and that type of thing. Down in Florida, they very strictly regulate it. They have certain areas where they're allowed, certain areas where they're not allowed. And if you believe it, their first offense is $20,000 fine. Second offense doubles that, and it goes up $20,000 every time after that. That's not my proposal here tonight. I'm just showing you the extremes of how people are regulating these in various areas. So, like I said, City of Frankfort, Marquette, a lot of this started because their city fire department had some concerns, mostly because they have students up there because of the university. It started with that, but they do inspections. They're proposing to have some rental registration requirements for their vacation rentals. In the town, they estimate they have about 90, I've heard different figures, but they estimate around 90 of these within the city of Marquette city limits. They're talking about additional requirements that would put locational requirements. So if you had, you'd only be allowed to have 2 per block, or 1 every 500 feet. You couldn't have one within 500 feet of another one, just so you wouldn't have a whole block of, the potential to have a whole block of these vacation rentals. What are some of the cons of this? You have different neighbors all the time, and you don't necessarily have anybody on site that's controlling for that. Different than a bed and breakfast, where you're required to have a person living on site, typically with a bed and breakfast. The owner or manager has to be living on site. Potentially more noise. You do have somewhat loss of long-term housing stock. It drives up some of the prices, and there's less housing available for long-term housing. Housing supply is a struggle in a lot of our areas now. You have a potential for overcrowding within the home. Like I said, if people are trying to get the most value out of it, they'll bring all their friends, and they may have more people than proper beds, evacuation system, proper fire exits, fire control, that type of thing. At the county level, like I mentioned, we don't have the control to do licensing and that type of thing. Some of the pros, obviously, additional income. There's more tourist options. If people come to your area, you have more places that people can stay other than just the motel. A lot of people like motels and hotels. They like the chains. Some people like to have the really local experience and stay at a local home in a neighborhood outside of the commercial, typically commercial zones. Resident owners can offset housing costs if you do the Airbnb where you're just renting out rooms but you actually live there. If you're struggling to make your mortgage, you can rent out a room and get some additional income from that, which is significant in our area especially. Well, in every area, a lot of people are struggling with their mortgages. And there's probably a lot more that we would probably hear from the public, both pro and con. What are the next steps for us? I guess I could suggest a couple of things. Get some initial feedback from all of you. I'm guessing a lot of the people here tonight probably have some input on that, but maybe we get some feedback from you. You're going to have public comments at the end of the meeting tonight, and then maybe we open it up to a public forum and we invite a number of other entities. I think in your packet you got an email today from the local Chamber of Commerce. They've been hearing from their members, and they have offered up any assistance they can provide to help facilitate that conversation. I appreciate that very much. We could look to the local lakefront housing associations. Some of them already don't allow it, so us to regulate it in addition either helps them or over-regulates. It's hard to tell. We probably want their feedback. Lake associations, realtors, generally homeowners and residents of the area, and other members of the public and organizations. So we could come up with a list of those organizations to include and start that conversation. I hesitate to draft anything additional. Obviously, I'd rather hear feedback because I really don't have a sense of the consensus of this organization, and then in the end, if any changes were to be made by the elected body, the Board of Commissioners, and what their sense of this is. I wouldn't want us to run into that situation like Marquette, where you were working on something in your bubble and it didn't, and they decided to do something very different. So, personally, I've heard just people calling and talking about it. I'm hearing strong feelings on both sides of this issue. So, I guess that's my report for you tonight. Looking for you for guidance as to what you'd like me to do next, what kind of public forum, if any, you'd like me to arrange for you, and how you want to proceed.
Steve,
Yeah.
if you talk to Traverse City, they do this right in their residential areas. Because I remember a couple of years ago, and I don't know if they ended up licensing them or what they did, but they solved the problem.
If you're talking about accessory dwelling units, the ADUs is what they talk about, or are you talking vacation rentals?
I didn't hear you.
They dealt with an issue called accessory dwelling units, where they were renting long-term, like apartments within their homes, or were they dealing with tourists?
No, it was just by the week for the summer.
Oh, okay.
For the Cherry Festival and some of the other stuff.
I'll reach out to them too.
And also, in the bigger city, I remember when I still worked down there, by the up in Oakland County, by the golf course, there was just a number of these big rich homes they rented out to different people to come in.
Sure.
And it was big dollars.
Yeah. The one thing I found when I was looking at some of these were they created zones where, sort of red zones where they simply weren't allowed. They were very definitely single-family home, long-term residential. But then they did allow for certain areas along either waterfront, not all waterfront, but some waterfront, they were allowing this type of rental to occur. That's the other part of what I could see happening, taking quite a long time, is trying to find those neighborhoods where they are typically happening and those where they aren't, and trying trying to delineate those in some way, I don't know.
For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm the chairman of the zoning board of appeals, so I'm the bridge between the planning commission and the zoning board of appeals. A week ago, we had a case before us which was tabled. And I'm happy that it was tabled because I think it's something that deserved more attention than the ZBA settling that one case. The ZBA case is not supposed to set a precedent, but in point of fact, it probably does. The case that we had was a short-term rental situation, what we're talking about here. It was not a short-term rental specifically to single families, but it was opened up for multiple families in the same unit or multiple individuals not related to each other. The ZBA could have come up with a answer to that particular case. I can't say how it would have turned out because it was tabled. I have my own feelings as one member of both the Planning Commission and the ZBA on this. I personally am not convinced that the legal determination is really sound on whether it is or is not legal to rent for short terms. I look at it as the fact that the zoning determines land use. And the question in my mind is, if you can rent for 30 days or more to an individual, two families, or multiple individuals, if you can do it for 30 days or more, why does that preclude you from renting for 30 days or less? Now, I'm not saying that it should or shouldn't, but I don't really see the difference. Now, in talking to legal counsel and talking to other people, the distinction seems to be made that transient is determined at a 30-day level. Now, I can see where if you're renting for 30 days or more, you might want to look at the people renting a little differently than people that are renting for 30 days or less. In that, at 30 days, the way the law has been treating them, the renters then have certain rights. The right to evict them isn't instantaneous. You can't just say, don't like you anymore, get out. There's a process that has to be gone through because they have acquired certain legal rights at that 30-day period when they've rented. I don't see that 30 days or less that the owner's rights should be curtailed because it's for 30 days or less. I don't see where his rights to rent should be curtailed any more than they should be for more than 30 days. That's one thing I'm looking at. I'm also looking at the fact that in the Lake and Stream district, where this case is, single-family dwellings are permitted use by right. The use of that dwelling for multifamilies or multiple individuals not related technically would not be covered by a single-family dwelling definition. However, in that Lake and Stream district, there are multiple uses that are allowed for multifamilies or multiple individuals not related. They're treated differently in that a single-family dwelling is a use by right, These other uses for multiple families or multiple individual rentals or uses for short periods of time are with a special use permit. A special use permit allows the planning commission to look at each individual use that comes under one of those definitions and review how it's going to be used, where it's going to be used, what precautions are used in taking care of whatever, and there are restrictions that can be placed by the planning commission within reason on these uses in the Lake and Stream Protection District. So this was the way I was going to look at it from the ZBA standpoint, and I can't say how I would have looked at it finally, because it isn't, it's coming back to me. But I was very happy to have it tabled, because I think we do have to look at the broader picture. These short-term rentals in the Lake and Stream District bring in a lot of money to the renter. I know of a number of cases where the renters can't afford the taxes on their house without renting. I know cases, one in my family, where the house came to this individual a number of years ago, right before the housing collapse, as a result of the death of another family member. Because of the taxes on the property, he immediately put it up for sale. He hasn't sold it. He's had it reappraised. He still hasn't sold it. He's been renting it, and it's only because he's been able to rent it that he's been able to hang on to it. That's one of the cases for short-term rentals. I'm also looking at the fact that Cheboygan County is aging. If we're going to depend on all the lake and stream property to be occupied by people who have retired already, I think we're in trouble. Retirees don't spend the money that young families spend. They don't spend it on recreation, they don't spend it on clothing, they don't spend it on food, they don't spend it on gasoline, they don't spend it in bars. So by limiting these short-term rentals, we are, I think, knocking out a significant portion of the income to this county. I don't personally think that's a good idea. The problems that have come up in enforcement have been as a result of a few instances, and I know of one of them that I'd have been climbing up the wall if it had been next door to me. But basically it's noise, vehicles, and watercraft. Too many watercraft? We have our regulation governs how many watercraft we can have on any piece of property based on the number of feet of frontage. It's already regulated. If they've got too many personal watercraft and boats, all it has to do, we go out there and issue a violation citation. So that to me is not a problem. Too many vehicles, if they're parked on the property, then nothing can be done about it. If they're parked on the street, then it becomes an issue with the road commission. That can be handled that way. Noise, okay, we can't govern noise as the county. The townships can, the cities can, and the villages can. But we can't do that from this level. So that's something that if it's decided that we're going to allow short-term rentals, it can be handled very easily. The question of local associations having prohibitions on short-term rentals, whether we allow them or whether we don't allow them, they can prohibit them. That's up to them. If the county says short-term rentals in Lake and Stream are okay, a local association can say, not in our area. That's it. Our decision here has nothing to do with that. They can be as restrictive as they want. There's a lot more I can say, but I think that covers a lot of it. I think we're cutting off our nose to spite our face if we prohibit them.
Chuck, I have.
Believe it or not, I agree with Chuck. It doesn't happen very often. How many enforcement issues have you had? I remember one on Black Lake. We have hundreds of these places that are rented, very few complaints. The Planning Commission, after public hearing, just agreed to allow 180 days of camping with an outhouse, no garbage, no numbers of people, anything. We just allowed people to put additions on within 5 feet of the neighbor's home. You know, I think,
Property line, not the neighbor's.
well, the neighbor's property line, which sometimes is several feet, you can't even put a ladder up. So I think that use is definitely more intense than this. We've had very few problems. I think that maybe boats, docks, and parking, as Chuck said, we really can regulate the number of docks and boats. Parking, if they're on that property, that's their own issue. If it's on the county road, like you said, it's their issue. So without knowing what the public has to say, I think Frankfurt has a good idea. Allow them until they become a terrible problem or even a greater problem, and then maybe look at them. For every person that rents their cottage or their home to come in here for a special use permit, to me is ridiculous, because there's so many of them that exist. It's bringing in money, people are maintaining their properties well. I think we should take a good look before we do any enforcement or change an ordinance to require that.
Just to be clear, we have to do enforcement because that's the way the ordinance
Well, that's
is
what we can do is
written
just
right now.
revise
We
the
can
ordinance
revise
like
it.
Frankfurt
Exactly.
does to allow it.
You asked about number of enforcement matters. The number of enforcement matters right now is not all that great. I think it's 6 to 8. What happens is every time I look at that, I have to be equitable and treat those around it. You start looking at the map on VRBO's site, just that one site, and there's more than you care to count right now. So that's why I'm bringing it up. If we want to change, I'd rather change it and not have to do all that enforcement, if that's not the intent of what
I think
people want.
we've been complaining for years on enforcement. I commend you on enforcement.
Mr. Popular.
Yeah. But I think we need to change the
Change it.
regulation.
All right.
I do too. I think that we have to change
The
it.
criticism is not of the
I
enforcement.
understand completely. Thank you.
I love the enforcement.
Well, my first thought on this too, after hearing it, was I think we need to be careful not to overreact to some of these complaints, because I've seen us also go ahead and say, okay, we'll take care of this problem, and then we go into this discussion, we pass a bunch of stuff, and then we still have the same problems with noise, parking, and whatever, and it comes right back to the people. But I also said, I've had a lot of experience with these rentals. I've rented multiple families in one dwelling. I have them all around me right now. I live on the lake, where people are renting by the week. I don't know, they might be renting by the day, I'm not sure.
And what I found is it's really a matter of what kind of connection you have in your neighborhood, and what does the renter do to police their own property. Typically, if they have someone looking at it, I guess my philosophy was when I rented to people, I knew what they did during the week. I had a rental manager. I didn't live there. I was living in another state. My rental manager went there, patrolled the area once in a while, maybe a couple of times a week. If that person created a problem, lots of traffic, lots of noise, lots of booze, lots of parties, and next year they weren't there. They didn't get rented to. It didn't matter. I kept a list of people, but it worked out pretty well. And right now, I can't think of a complaint I have with my neighbors, and I know their rental, I meet the renters all the time. So I think we need to be careful not to rush into this thing and do something. And I also agree with Chuck and Mike around this whole thing around the tourist area. I mean, this VRBO is huge. I've used it too, and I think it is a significant chance to increase the rentals. It can be businesses for people. I mean, it's our livelihood is tourism. So I wouldn't support a lot of activity to go in and try to limit all of this in some manner.
It's an easy thing if we decide and the Board of Commissioners approves it to allow this. A couple of sentences is it in the regulation to allow it. So it isn't a real, it's a decision that has to be made, and once a decision is made as to which way to go, it's an easy solution. I just keep coming back. Every time I go through Cheboygan, there's a different set of vacant buildings. I mean, when I bought my business here 30, 40 years ago, the town was pretty well filled up. And it's been going downhill ever since. I mean, even the things like bars, we've got half as many bars as we had. Automobile parts stores. We had 4, we got 2 now. Restaurants. Everything else, clothing stores. It's just, if we can't get people in here to spend money, the businesses aren't going to make it. How many businesses have we reviewed for special use permits in the last couple of years here that went in? I can, 2 or 3 of them in Indian River in the last year, they're not there anymore. I mean, it's, business is tough, and it's always been tough in Cheboygan County. If the unemployment rate in the state was 8%, it was 16% in Cheboygan County. And it's always been that way. When I first came here, I tried to get things going. The Black Lake Chivalry was dead at that point. And I put on the Chivalry out there at the Chateau North for 2 years and funded the whole thing. And a few of the merchants in town that I knew and were friends with got on it. The rest of them said, well, that's not in town. We're not going to support that. We don't want something going on out there at Black Lake. That isn't going to help us. Well, it does help. I wasn't out at Black Lake. I was right here at the junction. But you bring people in that spend money, and it helps. I used to figure that I sold snowmobiles, ATVs, watercraft. I rented cross-country skis. I sold cross-country skis. I made more money on rentals than I ever made on the new machines. I was lucky if I broke even on new equipment. Darn lucky. And back in 1980, I was paying 20% interest on my floor plan, because I couldn't get the floor plan financed through the local bank. Yeah, I was paying 20% interest on it. I was paying over $10,000 a month interest on the floor plan. I was making $200 a day on rental of a watercraft, personal watercraft, or a snowmobile. People would come up here and they'd rent for a week. That's $1,400 per unit. That had helped pay some of that interest I was paying in the floor plan. Back then, a lot of my customers were people from downstate that had a second home up here. A lot of them worked for the automobile industry, either for the companies, the major companies themselves, or suppliers. Well, the restrictions and that fallen in when we had General Motors go bankrupt, a lot of those people lost their second homes up here. The income that they used to have, they don't have anymore. Anything we can do to get anybody to come up here that still has money, we should do. Because if we don't, things are going to get worse. Because the population is aging. We don't have the young families anymore. And the young people, when they do graduate, they can't get jobs here anymore. Cheboygan school system, they had 4 elementary schools. How many do you have now? 2. One down, just east side or west side?
East side.
East side?
Goes west side.
It goes west side. So we're now down to 1 out of 4. That tells you that the young people aren't here anymore. And unless this county does something to promote business and bring income in, this county's gonna be dead.
We don't want that.
I think the whole demographics is changing too, and you have to look at this differently, because, you know, when P&G was here and we had a lot of business here, I mean, you did have the young families, and the young families had some money, they went out and bought on the lake, and what I'm seeing on the lake around me is there are people trying to hang on to their places. And the older families, some of those people are starting to grow. So what happens is then the kids are left with it, but there are no jobs here for them. So they all work downstate. So every one of those places now is in jeopardy of selling out to somebody else. Well, who's gonna buy that? I don't know, the young people buy it, or whatever. But I do think there's a viable chance that people might operate that as a business. They might operate it as, you know, a family, so they can continue to use it too. I've seen that happen. And I've had good success with places like that I've seen, where people have a vested interest in keeping up the property. Because they can't get money out of the property by just allowing the thing to go to ruin. On the other hand, I've seen places where that's happened, where the kids can't keep it up. They're trying to hang on to it, but the property is just slowly deteriorating in front of our face. And so I think, I agree with Chuck that I think that this is a viable chance to maybe change the dynamics of the area a little bit and really add maybe a viable component for long-term growth.
Well, every time that property changes ownership, it's uncapped for taxes. And those taxes that
Yep,
are
that's another-
staggering
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
lakefront property are going up.
Mhm.
If you can't keep it owned by the same people, the next one that owns it is gonna pay more.
Yeah.
Not if the assessment was down.
Well, but the property values are going up now. Waterfront, they are.
Assessments haven't changed.
No. But if they've been owned for 20 years or 30 years, and they change ownership, then it's uncapped, and the property taxes go up. Way up.
Take the scenic drive up to Legs End sometime and look at all the property for sale in there. It's breathtaking. Those are all, most families that own those at one time that are all, the kids can't handle them, getting out of them. They can't find a buyer.
Okay, anything else from the planning commission on this?
I only have one other thing. I would like to hear from the public. I know we're gonna have a public comment section, but, and then maybe have a little discussion after that as to where would that lead us? Does that tell us to do something a little different, or what would be the next steps?
A suggestion would be to take one of your meetings where there might not be anything else on the agenda and have a forum at another location. If we filled this up tonight without even inviting anybody, like specific, like the associations or chambers or anything, we probably would like, you probably would want to have it at a different spot, maybe the Opera House or something, and just give the meeting to the public to allow them to say what they want.
I think we ought to just pick, well, we'll let the public have their shot at it tonight.
Yes.
But I think the solution is to pick a meeting time and have it just for this subject, and have it at the high school or the Opera House or someplace like that, where we can get people in, because we're not gonna get them all in here.
No.
Okay, let's finish out our agenda and then we'll get to public comments. Staff report?
I have nothing to report tonight, Kathy.